Today we are going to show you all of the modifications we've made to the RMAX so far, take it on a little trail to test it, and stay tuned to the end and we will show you some of our install. So let's get rolling. Up front we added synthetic rope to the factory winch and a Haas fairlead. It's the worn winch rope upgrade. We added full skids underneath the unit, the whole underside. The worn winch wireless Bluetooth controller, so we can control the winch remotely via our cell phone, which actually works really well because the cab controls aren't always convenient if you're trying to winch in awkward situations. I think that's gonna come in real handy. On the exterior, we also added the factory Yamaha OEM glass windshield that comes with the windshield wiper and a washer. So it has a little reservoir that gets installed underneath the hood here. And that has been really nice. Then on the back, we put on the Yamaha rear window. And it's a sliding glass window and it fits really nice. Nice fitment, works with the factory roof. And then we added the Yamaha soft sided doors. And these take some modification because they're really not made for the back window or the front window, but you have to just do some cutouts and it works fine. It should be nicer for the colder wintry type months. Mirrors on the side, and they have some LED lights on them and they fold in and whatnot, so if you hit them on a tree, no big deal. We also added a full street legal kit, so it's got turn signals and it's got emergency flashers and brake lights, and the turn signals are up front here and they're just little cutouts for the LED lights that go in here. And then the rear actually used the factory lights for everything, the turn signals and the emergency flashers. And we got it fully street legal in Arizona, so it has Arizona license plate and title and all that fun stuff, insurance, which is pretty cool. I found the perfect spot for storing our little jack. I just put it inside the frame here and then turned it up so it doesn't move around. And that's a nice low spot, but it wanted to be able to carry a jack because we have a spare tire as well, which we will get to. In the front suspension, we added upper and lower control arms from Super ATV, and these basically add ground clearance with the radius bends as well as they move the axle forward. The axles are the Ryco 2.0 shafts, and these are a bit stronger, larger than the factory ones. Some of the guys have had problems breaking the front axle shafts on these things, even with stock size tires. Because we're oversized tires, we upgraded those. It's got the beefy heavy duty ball joints upper and lower. And then we've got the shocks. We added the little tender springs, and that gives it just a little bit better ride quality, a little more adjustment for height. We added limit straps for it, and that's just to keep with the higher weight of the tires and wheels. When the suspension unloads, it keeps all of that weight from pulling against the shock and trying to pull the shock apart. Now the steering was another weak point on the RMAX, and we upgraded it with the Weller Racing steering setup, so it replaces the tie rod inner or outer, and it has this nice heavy duty shaft, and it is a big upgrade in strength. However, we do have to sort it out a little bit because of moving the axle forward. It puts it at a pretty steep angle and you can feel it kind of bind a little bit, so we're gonna have to maybe figure out a solution for that. Now with these 34-inch tires, we'll show you at the end of the video how we installed them and checked them for clearance, but they have plenty of clearance through the whole range of motion, as well as the rear. The rear we had to limit the travel just a slight amount just to keep it from contacting the plastics, but we can basically fully cycle the suspension front and rear without having any sort of contact with these oversized tires, which is really great. Wheels and tires, got the Method 15-inch alloy wheels, and these have their Beadgrip technology, so it's not a bead lock wheels. These are fully DOT approved, road legal. Actually had them installed by Discount Tire, which was great because they can mount them and balance them and all that fun stuff. The bead lock wheels are technically not road legal, and none of the tire shops will mount them for you, so you need to do it yourself. And I didn't really want to deal with the extra weight, and I've never really had a problem with losing beads anyways. So the less weight and easier for maintenance was kind of a big upside on that. These tires are Milestone Patagonia SXT tires that are rated to be a 34-inch tire. They actually measure about 34.5 when mounted on these wheels, which is pretty impressive. They're a very true to size, even oversized type of tire. Probably measure closer to 35 for a lot of other tires. And these are DOT approved, road legal tires, which is why I decided to try them out. They're kind of an interesting tread pattern because they have kind of more of an all-terrain type tread pattern, but it's got quite a crown to it, so it's interesting. We'll see how they do in all the rocks and different terrain, but on road it rides kind of more on this section of the tread. It doesn't really get out to the outer edges. In the rear, we added a receiver shackle for being able to pull ourselves or somebody else out if we got stuck. We added the Super ATV rear control arms that add quite a lot of ground clearance. They're also a lot beefier, so you can drag them on rocks and probably not damage them quite as easily. We added the limit straps in the back here. We have the Ryco 2.0 axles in the rear as well. And then we did all of the service on this unit. So we changed the transmission fluid, pulled apart the CVT, re-greased everything, did the differentials, the oil change. Basically serviced a little early, did a 1,000-mile service on it, which is normally like a 1,700-mile service. So it's good to go for a bit. The latest, biggest upgrade we added was a bed rack, and I had my buddy Derek put it together, weld it up. He's an awesome fabricator. He did a really nice job basically building this custom rack because nobody makes a rack for these units right now. So you can see he made these really nice brackets here that bolt to the factory bolt locations, and then bent up all this 1-inch tubing. We've got a mount for our flag, and then this holds the spare tire, and we're just using lug nuts to hold it on here, so it's really secure for off-roading. And then on this side we have mounts for our shovel, so when we're camping we can bring our shovel with us. And then we have 2 RotoPax mounts on either side, and these are accessible when we pull the bins out. And one is water for now, and the other side here is for fuel. And we could do both fuel or water, whichever, because they're both the same size, which is nice. We have these camping totes, and we tested them out camping, and we can fit all of our camping gear in here, our tent and food and everything in these 2 totes, so they kind of stay somewhat clean and dust free, which is nice for going on these type of treks, and fit perfectly underneath our rack here, but also keeps the spare tire as low as possible so we can actually see out of the rear window, which is a really nice thing. It also keeps the weight as low as possible for off-road type trails where you don't want too much top heavy weight. That's really nice. It's also nice because we can still use our dump bed, and all of our stuff stays in here, which is great. And you can see up here, this is how the spare tire is mounted with the 2 factory lug nuts. So it's really easy to put it on and off, but also very secure for our off-road adventures. And a lot of times we will probably leave our camping bins behind if we're just going out on a day trip. So it gives some flexibility with how we use this bed area. So this is a massive improvement because the bed is pretty small. I mean, you're only 30-inch long bed, and getting that spare tire out of the bed area is huge to be able to actually have it be somewhat functional. So super excited about that. On the inside, I added lots of sound deadening material, so the whole roof is sound deadened, ripped apart the back wall, the entire tub and insulated the inside and outside of them, the transmission tunnel and the engine cover area. So this thing was completely deconstructed and insulated. I can't say that it makes a massive difference. I would say minimal at best, but it just seemed like it would be a good thing to try, just to limit some of the noise in this thing. And under the hood we have the emissions block-off plates by Weller Racing, as well as the Weller Racing tune. And that Weller Racing tune, one of the biggest benefits to it is the ability to reprogram it to run on regular fuel, although we still have it on the 91 octane fuel at this point, but it does come with multiple tunes. And the other big advantage is it turns on the cooling fan about 10 to 15 degrees sooner than what the factory is. So it keeps the engine running a little bit cooler, which is really nice for running on trails, not seeing that temperature going up over 200. So that's a really great upgrade. I'll put all of the parts list and details on all the parts in the description below, so check that out if you have any questions about any of these parts. So that's a quick overview of all of the upgrades we've done to the little RMAX, but let's go test it out on some obstacles and see how it does. Let's hit the trail. Yeah, ooh, tire in the air. Woohoo, that looks sketchy. Little Billy, go get it.
In the air while the driver is trying to climb again. Perfect. Okay, we're gonna go. Woo! You want to turn passenger and get off the log. Let's see if your back tire will climb it. I think you'll be fine. Yeah, you're going. Yeah, there you go. You can straighten it out. Little R made it! We did have to bump it. It's not something that looks really scary. Taco didn't used to do the one wheel in the air a lot, and when it did, it was very scary. So I'm not used to it in the air. Oh, that seems to be working really well. Yeah, there you go. You're climbing and clearing. There you go.
Well, we made it up the big rock obstacle. I guess our upgrades have paid off and they're working well. We'll show you a few of the in-progress sections of the video if you stay tuned for that. Otherwise, thanks for watching. Hit the like button. We'll catch you on the next adventure. Talk to you soon. Bye. Fitting 35-inch tires on the RMAX. What we had to do is reduce the compression travel on the shock. So the best way to do that is just to basically add a spacer to the bump stop. So these little spacers just snap on to the shock shaft, and you can get various different height profiles, and you can stack them if you wanted to. And what we found is that this spacer, I think this is 3/8 or 1/2 inch spacer, was just a little bit too much. When it was fully compressed, there's actually quite a bit of room left. So we went down to a 1/4 inch spacer. And what we did is put jack stands under here and then compressed this bump stop. You can see it compressing here just by jacking it up. I mean, that's about as compressed as it's going to get. If it was being jumped, it might go a smidge further, but it's about half its original height there. So you see it's totally bottomed out. Now, we were able to compress it like this because it removed the springs from the shock or the coilover. So that allows a lot more control, and we can do some testing. So let's take a look at our tire clearance over here now. All right, so this is fully stuffed all the way to the bump stop with our 1/4 inch spacer. And you can see there's actually quite a lot of room right through here. We could definitely go up to a slightly larger tire, but where it was rubbing was right here on this inner plastic. Now with the spacer in here now, with it fully compressed, you can see we've got, you know, a good 1/4 inch gap here, and it should be fine even if the bump stop compresses just a little bit more, that it won't rub. And that's the whole idea, is that we don't want the tire making contact with the body or the plastics. And anytime you add larger diameter tires in stock, you need to check the compression travel and see if you need to adjust it. These are technically a 34-inch tire, but they measure around 34 and a half, and the stock tires were 30-inch tire. When putting bigger tires on any rig, you really have to upgrade the rest of the components, and for the most part, if there's an upgrade available for our off-road rigs, we typically try to install them because it's a lot easier to do upgrades in a garage where it's nice and comfortable and clean than it is in the dirt being broken on the side of the trail. Plus, much more convenient not being broken on the trail. So the first thing we are changing out here is the CV axles, front and rear. This is the rear axle. Now these are supposed to be fairly beefy. There hasn't been too many people who have broken them, but check out the Rhino 2.0 in comparison. You can see much bigger ball, but these chromoly shaft versus just a steel. This is going to take a lot more abuse than the stock ones. And the front axle shafts are actually, people have had problems breaking them on these things, even with fairly stock sized tires. So these are going to be extremely beneficial in the front. Now, the other thing we're changing out in the rear is the lower A-arms. So you can see these are bent to give us some extra clearance all the way through here. And they're super beefy. The factory are kind of just a stamped steel design, and it's all straight and flat. These aren't terrible. They probably hold up all right for some rock impacts, but we'll gain a little bit of clearance with it. With the round tube design, it'll probably slide off rocks a little bit easier. And it's just a nice little upgrade to do at the same time. All right, so we got the rear shocks and springs installed. The upper, we replaced the tender spring with a Bandit tender spring. This will help regain some of the ride heights. We were kind of riding a little bit uneven side to side, and allow us a little more adjustment height-wise. And it will possibly increase the ride quality. Some people have said it's improved the ride quality. Now, we also added some limit straps to the shock, and the reason being is because with a heavier tire and wheel package, when the tire or the suspension unloads, that heavier weight is going to be pulling down against the shock. So the shock in the stock form is basically limiting your down travel when it goes to full extension. But with a heavier tire and wheel, that's a lot of stress to put on your shock. The strap basically stops the downward shock travel just before it reaches its maximum length extension. So it basically is just insurance to help keep the shock from falling apart. Now, if you drove it really slow all the time and you never went to full extension, you wouldn't need straps. But if you occasionally might hit a whoop or bump where you maybe catch a little bit of air, that will help it not overextend the shock and damage it. So it's a nice little upgrade. We got the rear suspension all done. You can see how much clearance these lower control arms offer now. And we've got the limit straps on. We did a little zip tie just to hold them from rubbing on the exhaust. And now limit straps, you want to be basically almost about an inch shorter than your total travel per foot. So these shocks here are about 25 inches fully extended eye to eye. So the straps we got were 23 inches. And when we actually mounted them and had the full weight of the suspension unloaded, they stretched to 24 inches. So they're limiting about an inch of our total extension travel right now, but they do stretch. So ideally they'll end up limiting the travel by maybe half inch or so, which is no big deal at all. And it's actually good to limit your travel just a little bit, just to put less stress on your CV axles and all your joints, especially if you're using it hard. Our ground clearance increased quite a bit because of the springs, but we also need to get the new springs settled in just a little bit. We were at 14 3/4 from the skid plate to the ground, and now we're at 17 inches. Ideally, we'll land right about 16 inches at the skid plate to the ground. That will work really well for rock crawling, but back end knocked out looks pretty good. All right, up front, to fit these larger tires, we have the Super ATV forward offset upper and lower control arms that move the axle forward about 2 inches. You can see we pulled the coil over coil and we jacked all the way up to the bump stop. It's fully compressed, and you can see the tire still has some space for the body. Probably could go up to a 35 here. This is a large 34. let's go ahead and turn. You can see that right now, full compression, we got clearance for the fender. Now full lock steering to the driver's side. We got clearance all the way around here. Clearance to the bumper. Let's turn it the other way. And we have full clearance to the full range at full compression. That's the best way to test oversized tires on any rig, is to pull the coil, jack it up to the bump stop, and lock to lock steering. So we should be good to go clearance wise with these 34s. Probably could do a 35 with this offset. Pretty cool. What you working on?
I'm putting the brake line back on.
You got the brake line
Yeah.
put in.
So we have the new axle, and the upper control arm is the original, and the lower control arm is about to go on.
Excellent. Let's get it put together.